Yo, it's that shit, my boy. I like this. Yeah, cause I say that I'm up. Yeah. Yo, I'm up. Can I say that I'm up? Yeah. Check this out right here. Here we go again, people. The vibes is here.
What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Nighttime, man. I want to just welcome myself back on the platform. I know it's been a little while. I do apologize. Your boy's been working extremely hard. Just got a lot of things going on. One of the things, more specifically, is making sure that I'm, building up some content for you guys so that I'm putting out content more consistently. Another thing is my new album. The time is now. I wanted to have that album out the first quarter, but it looks like that album's going to be coming out in the second quarter. So produced by my man Half Breed, executive produced by myself, and we're just going in there, cleaning up some things, getting that project ready. So I'm just really excited about getting that out here to the public. 12 cuts, some really great features on the project. I have a lot to say on this album, and I'm just looking forward to, getting it out there to people, man, that really love hip hop music, the culture, and they like positivity, and that's what I'm about. That's what I pride myself on. But nonetheless, let's get into the topic today, man. I really want to talk to you guys. Also, one more thing, today is your boy's birthday, so that's another reason why I wanted to get this content out and to the people. Today's my birthday, so I felt like, you know what, this is the perfect time to get some content out there and talk to you guys, and chop it up about one of the things that I really love, and that's hip hop music. But nonetheless, man, welcome to Shooting the Breeze. As I said before, again, we talk about hip hop culture, independent music. We talk a little bit about life and everything in between that. And, more importantly, I like to try to keep the noise down and really just focus in on what matters. And if you rock with this conversation, if you rock with real perspectives, you already know you're in the right place. So let me just kind of set the topic in the mood a little bit here. So kind of was going on the internet, and a lot has just happened in hip hop in general, right? There's been a lot of things that have taken place over the last month. You've had 50 Cent and all of his beefs, right? Ti, Mano, and the crew. I think Ja, a little bit of Ja also prior to that, but just a lot of that. I think J. Cole came on and spoke with Cam, so you had that conversation, and just a little bit of everything, right? And one thing that came across my radar is one of my favorite rappers of all time, actually my second favorite rapper of all time, and that's Jay Hove, my dude. And he was actually recently on GQ, and he spoke with the young gentleman. I don't, and pardon me, I don't know the young gentleman that he spoke with, but I really liked the interview. It was real chill. Jay was just being his authentic self, and it was just really good to hear from him because, as we all know, Jay doesn't do a lot of interviews. Jay is in the cut. He's he's in with his family. He's behind the scenes. He just moves differently, right? And especially over the last several years, Jay is, if he's gonna give an interview, right, he's gonna give you an interview. And again, it's far and few between. So nonetheless, let's get into it. Jay talked about a lot of different things, and I'm not gonna talk about every single thing that Jay discussed, but I just want to really get into some of the things that he talked about that I found to be very interesting. And in that conversation, Jay kind of broke his silence, and he said we played enough defense in 2026. I'm sorry, in 20 2025. Now it's time to play offense in 2026. So when somebody like Jay talks like that, this ain't just a random quote, right? That's a message. Jay is sending a message. And, I'm just going to be real with y'all. Jay, like I said, he's my second favorite rapper of all time. So when he speaks, it resonates a little different for me. So the question is, for me, what does offense mean coming out of Jay's mouth? And, what is he talking about? So for me, you know, here's the roadmap. And let me give you my thoughts. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to kind of break down what I think he meant by defense, what offense also could look like from his perspective, and some of the other things that he touched on, because it wasn't just that one quote that he talked about, but it included many different things. I think he talked about today's rap beefs and how he felt about that. And also he kind of discussed what all these things mean in hip hop right now. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the defense and let's give some context around that. So when Jay talked about playing defense, he was really speaking on that last phase of his life. He talked about dealing with things publicly, people having opinions about him, narratives being pushed, and instead of responding to everything, Jay stayed really quiet for the most part. He moved, I believe, relatively smart. He stayed calculated. He protected his name instead of feeding into everything. And in my personal opinion, I think that's extremely important because in today's world, everybody reacts, in my personal opinion, but he didn't for the most part. He also talked about his family, right? He talked about being a father, being present, making sure his kids see him and not just the icon Jay, right? And as a man who's a family person himself, I have a daughter, I'm also a husband, I could relate to that. And I would say that resonated with me because when you reach that level of success that Hove is at, your moves aren't just about you anymore, right? He's thinking about legacy. He's thinking about long term. He's thinking beyond his name. He's thinking about things beyond even the music. Okay. And that plays into that defense part, protecting everything that you've built. All right. Let's get into the offense. So Jay talked about 2026, right? 2026 is offense. That's a different energy, right? That's him saying, I've been watching. Now I'm about to act, right? When Jay goes on offense, it typically is never small. It's typically pretty big. So that could be a number of things. So these are some things that it could potentially be. It could be the music that he may make. He may make music that may shift the conversation. It could be about business moves that shake things up. Or it could just be him stepping back into the spotlight with all of those intentions. Because one of the things that that I do uh, know about Jay in terms of the persona, Jay is pretty calculated with his moves. He is, right? And that's been proven. Another interesting thing that I found in that interview that I found interesting is when he discussed beef. And it's funny because let me not give it away. I'll just say this. I just found it interesting in terms of his perspective. And his takeaway on beef. So let me hit it to you like this. So it gets interesting because Jay spoke, like I said, about rap beefs. You know, he already knew about a lot of the beefs that were going on today. People automatically thinking that, uh, kind of talking about Kendrick Lamar and kind of putting and pushing him into the conversation. And I think Jay talked about the whole Super Bowl thing, in which Kendrick had Kendrick was hot, right? Kendrick was hot that year, and he wanted to bring Kendrick on because, man, he not only was he hot, man, he had the hottest record of the year. He was just hot, and he just felt it was a good move. It had nothing to do with, oh man, I'm siding with Kendrick, but it was just a lot of individuals who were pushing narratives because they hate Drake, right? So I found it interesting, um, to hear his perspective on that because people just automatically felt Jay siding with Kendrick, and they were just pushing him into the middle of something that he had nothing to do with. And I think he talked about that, like, hey man, it was beefing way before the Super Bowl thing came. It was already brewing, right? That was about to come. Pause. And I think he mentioned him and Nas, how that was brewing, right? And eventually it just came to a head, right? So, Jay was basically saying, man, beef today also isn't the same. He went on and he talked about it's not about sharpening your pen anymore. It's not about pushing the culture forward. Now it's about, tearing people down. It's about defaming people, talking about your family, your kids and like women and children used to be off limits. Now people are just saying anything, right? They're going after all of your loved ones. You got the social media moments, you got, all of the viral clips, personal attacks instead of lyrical competition. And I do agree with this. I think it's gone into a very evil spirited place, some of it, not all of it, but I do think it's moved into just moved into a place where, and I'm not saying every beef, but I think it's just some of them have just gone extremely too far to where it's like, what are we doing, right? And that's a big statement. Also, like I said, coming from somebody who came from an era where beef actually elevated the art, and to kind of hear Jay discuss it and kind of really asking is, beef doesn't really seem like it's really good for the culture anymore. I think we've elevated to a point to where we can maybe do away with that, right? So that was kind of his take. So you got to kind of ask yourself, is beef still good for hip hop? I don't know. Is it? You guys tell me. Or has it turned into something else? Because look, back then, beef made you better. And, now sometimes it just creates a lot of noise. And then that ties right back into kind of what Jay was saying. Maybe part of the offense isn't even about beef. It's about rising above the beef and all the bullshit, right? And I found that interesting. Sometimes just moving in silence and just going about, being that creative, being that businessman or woman, just moving with dignity and class is maybe the best way to move now. Collaborations and bridging gaps might be the way to move now. And when I say bridging gaps, and this is me saying legitimately bridging gaps, because they kind of give you a little bit of perspective from me, and obviously I'm not Jay or anything like that, but being um, a hip hop artist myself independently and coming, coming up and seeing hip hop in its organic stages when I was coming up and seeing where hip hop is now as a OG in the game. I look at a lot of the young dudes and I say, man, there's a lot of young dudes who I genuinely like, who I think are genuinely, who are dope. And as an OG, I try to stay fresh, right? I don't want to sound dated with my style. I want to sound fresh. I want to sound, um, I want to have a vibrant sound. So, and I think sometimes in order to do that, I think you got to keep your ears to the street. You got to tap into what some of the young dudes are doing. How are they saying certain things? How does the music sound? The wave of the music. And then not copy, but show that, you know what, I can do that. I can step in that space because obviously you want to capture the ear of today's listener. So you want to be you. You want to maintain who you are. You want to show your elevation and your growth. But at the same time, you want to show that, hey, I'm young in spirit. And I think by doing that, you're able to bridge gaps. You're able to show like, look, man, this is what it's all about. Old meets new, new meets old, and we create something fresh, right? But that's kind of my way of talking about the beefs, right? Why are we beefing? Let's just work together. If we can't work together, let's just keep it moving. And again, that's just my own personal perspective. I digress a little bit there. Jay also kind of talked about the whole Nas thing, and he had a section where he kind of said anytime you talk about Jay, right, you got to mention Nas, and because that conversation will never go away, right? Nas has been feeding the culture heavy, right? Dropping albums consistently, staying in that whole music space with multiple projects, obviously Hit Boy being the most memorable. And Jay's been more strategic, more quiet, more business focused. So if Jay is saying, it's about offense, is that him stepping back into that space where Nas has been active? And again, that's just a conversation for you right there. Is that the case? Is Jay looking to all of a sudden explode? Now, I know he has a couple of shows. One I know he's doing out in New York, I want to say in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. Then he's also doing one out in Philly. I think it's Beaumont Park. I don't know if hopefully I got that correct, but I know he's got a couple of shows, and he may have another one, but I'm only aware of those two particular shows, and I would like to go. I think I'm considering the one in Philly. All right. And then also another question is, does hip hop still need Jay? And that's just something that I just kind of threw out there. I think so. And I gotta ask this, right? Does hip hop still need Jay in 2026? I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say, because the game is different now, right? But at the same time, legends don't lose their impact, and when they move, it still means something. A la Nas in terms of what he's been able to do in the hip hop space. And then kind of my personal take. Okay. For me, I think this is bigger than hip hop. This is the mindset. So I think there's a season. I believe there is a season in life where playing defense, taking hits, staying quiet figuring things out is necessary. But there also comes a point to where I believe you got to decide, am I going to keep reacting, or am I about to take control? And that's what this sounds like to me. It sounds like Jay is saying, you know what? I'm going to control my own narrative, right? I'm not going to let people dictate how I move. I'm not going to let people dictate things that they say, making up things. And I think that's the problem I believe that's happening a lot in general. Obviously, I know we're speaking on Jay and hip hop, but I think that's a major problem. You have people who just say anything. They just make up shit without any support. They haven't even heard from the person, and they just keep saying things and making up shit. And you can see that in the comment section when you see, like, even this interview that Jay did with GQ. Prior to Jay even doing the interview, people will just make up stuff. Jay's not really that good. He's really not. He's an overrated rapper. You hear all kind of things, and I really don't understand the space that we're in right now, where people are really saying Jay's an overrated rapper. I mean, it's fine if you don't like him, you don't like him, but I don't understand it, man. Hov has made some of the most iconic classics in hip hop history. It is what it is. Nonetheless, I digress. I want to just close it out and say, when Jay-Z says 2026 is all offense, I just don't hear a rapper or a rapper talking specifically. I hear somebody letting it be known the next move is coming, and it might be bigger than music. But I want to know what y'all think. Is beef still good for hip hop today? And if Jay steps back into that space, does it shift the culture? Or has the game already moved on? Y'all tell me what you think. That's all I got to say. Nonetheless, man, I appreciate you guys for dropping on your boy Nighttime here on Shooting the Breeze. Drop your thoughts, your comments. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, peace.
The words that I speak is power, vivid as cameras. Aggression and ambition upload piles of stamina. The panorama's what I'm seeing up top, because the bottom it was covered with slop plus confrontational ops. The road ahead is possibilities, finesse your progress. The hit goes for memories. The tendency is stagnation, limited sensation. A lock is on, I know what a combination. Obligation, what you facing, but you be rarely chasing. Not even moving at a turtle's pacing. It's so problematic. The mental fog and the brain static. The able body jam is kinda tragic. Now you fighting over Popeyes. Dry skin looking cockeyed. Decisions that you make is rolling snake eyes. Can't even get a job at Five Guys. I guess I can't be surprised. Procrastination is the thief of your time. Get it?